Part 1.
You will hear a telephone conversation between the accommodation officer at a university and a student. First, you have some time to look at questions 1 to 3.
Good morning. National University Accommodation Office. Rosemary speaking. How can I help you?
Hi. I'm coming to do a short course at the university this summer, and I'd like to book some accommodation, please.
Okay. Have you seen the online booking form on our website?
Oh, no. Sorry, I didn't realize.
Don't worry. I can fill it in for you now if you like. Then I can email it to you so you can check it and submit it online. Will that be okay?
Oh, yes. Thanks.
Okay. First of all, what's your surname?
Blake. That's B-L-A-K-E.
Okay. And your first name?
Daniel.
Is that D-A-N-I-E-L?
Yes, that's right.
Thank you. And have you studied with us before?
Yes, I have.
Great. Then you'll have an ID document with a number. Have you got that to hand?
Yes, here we are. The number is 410623.
Thank you. And I'm putting male for gender.
That's correct.
Could I take an email address, please?
Sure, it's d.blake@internet.com, all lowercase.
Okay. So that's d.blake@internet.com.
That's correct.
And do you have a phone number where you can be reached if there's a problem?
Yes, that's 0779 435 354.
453354?
No, 435 354.
Okay, I've got it.
Before you listen to the rest of the conversation, you have some time to read questions 4 to 10.
So, you said you're going to be studying with us in the summer. What course are you doing?
I've enrolled to do art history.
And which start date have you selected? The 1st of July?
No, the later one.
The 4th of August?
That's it.
And what type of accommodation would you like to book? Was it full board, half board, bed and breakfast, or self-catering?
Self-catering, please.
Okay. And did you want a single room or a shared room?
Oh, I hadn't thought about that, really. Is there a difference in price?
Yes. The shared room is much cheaper, but I can't guarantee who you'd be sharing with at this stage.
I see. No, I don't want to share. Let's say single. I can see the prices here in the prospectus. It's not too expensive.
Good. And you'll see you can also pay extra for a private bathroom if you want.
Ah, yes. That sounds like a good idea.
So shall I put private? You can always change it before you send the form in if you have second thoughts.
Yes. Okay, let's do that.
And finally, Daniel, will you need a parking place?
Oh, yes, please.
I need to put here the type of vehicle, just whether it's a bicycle, a motorbike, or a car, you know.
Yes, it's for a car.
Okay, well, that's all. I'll email you this now and you can check it and send it in with your deposit.
Thanks.
Did you want to pay £50 or £100 as your initial deposit?
Oh, 100, please.
Thank you. A credit card payment will be prompted when you submit the form.
Okay.
Is there anything else I can help you with?
No, that's all. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Goodbye.
That is the end of part 1.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 2.
Part 2. You will hear an introductory talk about a countryside and woodland programme. First, you have some time to look at questions 11 to 17.
Good morning, and welcome to the Moorland Countryside and Woodland program. I'd like to give you some information about the program and the short courses we run for people on woodland awareness. We're actually a program run by volunteers, and we were set up 15 years ago to educate people of all ages and backgrounds about the wonders of our woodlands and hence nature itself. And for the past 5 years, we've been taking groups of youngsters in their teens on educational trips on Fridays, Saturdays, and Sundays. From schools, mainly from around the area, but some have come from much further afield. At first, some youngsters are not very impressed by the setting, because we discourage them from using any electronic devices, especially smartphones, so they can engage more with the surroundings. This throws them quite a bit. But almost without exception, by the end of the 3 days they're here, the young people don't want to leave and want to come back again. In fact, 2 of the workers here came with student groups 5 years ago. And when they left school, they came straight to work for us. The program is completely self-sufficient, due in part to the sales from the plant nursery and also to donations. But the bulk of our income's now from running the educational and awareness courses. This is a basic map of our center. We're here at the entrance, and you can see the cabins running along the east side of the path as you go north. The first cabin, Beach Lodge, is for students. It's quite large and can accommodate 10 students in bunk beds. Then the next 4 cabins are for families, and the cabin after that, Chestnut Lodge, is for teachers, which can hold up to 4 adults. On the west side of the path, directly opposite the family cabins, are the educational facilities. They're quite up to date with all the latest wizardry. And next to that's the cafeteria, which is shared with visitors to the center. Just beside the cafeteria is a family area with climbing frames for children. We don't allow open-air cooking here because of the trees. The plant nurseries, that area you can see that runs all the way along the north part of the map.
Before you hear the rest of the talk, you have some time to look at questions 18 to 20.
If you go over here, between the family area and the nursery, the path leads to the woodland itself. We're on a hill here and quite high up, and as there's some spectacular scenery around here, we have breathtaking views of the countryside. You can see the river stretching for miles through rolling countryside. Fortunately, the whole woodland is protected by law, so nobody can chop down any trees. The landscape here is not changed for hundreds of years. Some of the trees have been growing here rather a long time, and the aim of the scheme and the volunteers is to keep it that way. We advise people to stick to the paths because it's very easy to get lost. As you walk through the woodland, you'll see workers removing dead wood and trees. I'd ask everyone not to remove anything like seeds or flowers from the woodland so we can try and conserve it for future generations.
That is the end of part 2.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 3. Part 3.
You will hear two students talking about a research project they have to do together. First, you have some time to look at questions 21 to 24.
Hi, Mark.
Kirsty, hi. So, we've got this research project to organise. I really like the idea of doing it on the allotment gardens opposite the college. Brilliant idea of yours.
Oh, not really. I walk past there every day and see people working on little plots of land, growing their own food, and I thought it'd be interesting to find out more about it.
Great. So, we'd better decide who's doing what in terms of gathering some background data.
Right. I thought we ought to do two things. Do some background reading, then actually go and interview some of the people involved.
Sure. I guess we could start by looking into why the allotment gardens are there, whose idea it was, when they were established, etc., looking at historical records.
Well, I've already discovered that it was a national programme in the 1920s, so our local one would have been a part of that. I guess we could look at local records to see why this particular site was chosen.
OK, I'll do that then. I guess it was wasteland or something. There's quite interesting geology and soils round here, actually.
Oh, I don't think we need to go into all that.
Oh, OK.
But what you could do is find out what the terms and conditions are for the gardeners. Do they pay rent? Do they have a contract, etc.?
Well, I think you can ask them that. We don't need to research it ourselves.
Yes, you're right. But I did read a newspaper report that said the site was under threat of development. You know, somebody wants to build housing there.
Really? Now that is interesting. I could look to see whether anyone's applied for permission to the local council's planning office.
Exactly.
OK, great. Right then, I guess we need to ask somebody if it's OK before we go over there and start talking to people.
Yes. The land belongs to the city council and somebody there manages it. I'll give them a call.
Great. He should be able to give you a plan of the site too.
Yes, and maybe some indication of who amongst the gardeners it might be best to approach, like who's been there the longest or whatever.
Yeah, OK. It might be good to have an introduction rather than just approaching them out of the blue, actually.
I agree. Then I thought I ought to check out any other research there's been on the subject.
Yes, that's true. We don't want to do stuff that's already been done.
Before you hear the rest of the conversation, you have some time to look at questions 25 to 30.
Have you got any idea what we should actually focus on in our research?
Well, I think it's a choice between a survey about use, how many people use the land, how often they go, how productive it is, or something more attitudinal, like what motivates people to do it, what they get out of it, what difference it makes to their lives.
Yes, I like that. Let's go with that. But what about issues, disputes between the gardeners, difficulties they have with the management, things like that?
Well, I don't think we can make that our aim. There may not be any problems.
Yes, you're right. Let's stick to the attitudinal focus then.
OK.
I think the next stage is to do some preliminary work. Find out if we can get permission, see if anyone will talk to us, whether there are any specific issues we could focus on.
Well, shouldn't we consult our tutor before doing all that? Get the go-ahead for the topic in principle?
Well, she said specifically not to do that. To go to her once we had a definite proposal, with the details in place.
OK, let's do that then. I think that's going to be the hardest part.
What, writing the proposal?
No, finding what level of detail to go into. We could interview lots of people and try and find their overall views, or just pick a few and really do in-depth interviews with lots of questions.
I think you're right. But I think once we start, we'll see what's going to work best with this particular context.
OK.
Actually, there is one issue we could look into.
Really?
Yes, there's a particularly invasive wild plant species that grows around here. The college gardener said it's really hard to get rid of, and it makes growing other stuff difficult. I'm sure the gardeners on the allotments must have a problem with it. It's called creeping buttercup.
OK. What does it look like?
Well, there are two types actually. Bulbous buttercup, which is not a problem, and creeping buttercup, which is. To tell the two apart, you have to look at the flowers. They are identical with yellow petals, but the creeping buttercup doesn't have little leaves which point downwards just under the flower. They're called sepals, whilst the bulbous buttercup does.
OK.
And then it has polygonal-shaped leaves, rather than triangular-shaped leaves. So, if the leaf is divided into 5 sections, rather than 3, then it's the creeping buttercup.
Right.
Both plants have a long stem, which grows out of a bulb, which is below ground. But only the creeping buttercup sends out new stems from the base, which creep along the ground. And these are called stolons. It's these things which make the plants such a problem.
Interesting.
That is the end of part 3.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
Now turns to part 4.
Part 4.
You will hear part of a talk about the migration of early humans. First, you have some time to look at questions 31 to 40. Well, in today's lecture, we are going to explore early human migration out of Africa to colonize the world. Throughout history, there have been waves of humans migrating as people have moved from one locality to another, sometimes quickly over very short distances, and sometimes slowly over very great stretches of land, in search of a new or different or better life. There now appears to be general agreement that the first movement of people of any real significance in any part of our planet originated in East Africa, approximately 100,000 years ago. This first group of modern humans made their way across the Red Sea, which was then a dry bed, then through Arabia and into what is now the Middle East. But these early pioneers soon died out. Just like today, the Earth was subject to shifts in temperature. About 70,000 years ago, the planet became warmer and another group of modern humans migrated out of their homeland of Africa, following basically the same route, and then moving on to South Asia. By about 50,000 years ago, modern humans had colonized China, and about 45,000 years ago, they had reached Europe. These early humans settled in the wide open spaces of Siberia about 40,000 years ago, and about 20,000 years ago, modern humans reached Japan, which was connected to the main landmass at that time. Now, there was no land connection between Australia and Southeast Asia, so the first Australians who arrived around 50,000 years ago must have made the journey across the sea in simple boats to settle on the Australian continent. Modern humans moved from Asia to North America, which was reached across what is now the Bering Strait through Alaska. This migration happened between 15 and 13,000 years ago. There is also some evidence to suggest that modern humans came across pack ice via the North Atlantic, but this theory has been discounted by some. Since that time, the American continent has been the destination of waves of human settlement. Before we look at more modern examples of human movement, like the Anglo-Saxon migrations to Britain in the 5th century AD, the migration of Turks during the Middle Ages, and the migration of the Irish to America in the mid-19th century, I'd like to look at a migration within the continent of Africa itself that I'm personally very interested in. If we look at the map of Africa, we can see some patterns that are common to other waves of human movement throughout history. The routes here show what is probably the most significant migration in Africa itself, that of the Bantu, who spread out from a small region in West Africa near the present-day border of Nigeria and Cameroon, just around here on the map, to occupy roughly 30% of the continent by the year 1000 AD. A trigger for this movement may have been the result of the cultivation of the yam, a starchy root vegetable which Bantu farmers started to grow as part of their staple diet. This cultivation began around 2750 BC, resulting in the expansion of the population. The Bantu people then spread out into the neighbouring territories, which were at that time sparsely populated. As the land of the rainforest could not sustain the farmers and their families for longer than a few years, they moved on, felling trees and creating new clearances in the forest to cultivate yams. With the numbers of the Bantu on the increase between 2500 and 400 BC, the people were constantly on the move, migrating south down through modern-day Congo in Central Africa, and reaching Zimbabwe and modern-day South Africa by about 100 AD. It was contact with Sudan in North Africa that introduced the Bantu to iron production, in which they excelled. Once they had exchanged knowledge of working in iron from Sudan, the quality of their work rivaled that produced by the Mediterranean people of the time. They now had better tools to cut down trees, clear forests, and work fields. And there is one other benefit iron gave them, and that was a military advantage over their neighbours. I'd say that migration has transformed the world from early times, and we all reap the benefits of different peoples coming into contact with each other.
That is the end of part 4.
You now have half a minute to check your answers.
That is the end of the listening test. In the IELTS test, you would now have 10 minutes to transfer your answers to the answer sheet.